Number one superpower of the globalized world, the state that shapes world politics with its gigantic economy, unimaginable financial resources, and military potential, the United States of America. From the young to the old, there is no one who is not aware of the fact that this country, or rather the world, is distributing democracy. So how did all this happen? How did a country that was once a colony of Britain and France become a giant that challenged the world? There are actually very simple answers to this seemingly complex question. Making the most of favorable circumstances, that is, seizing opportunities in a timely and correct manner. This is, of course, a political style that requires strategic acumen. Don't forget to subscribe before the conversation. In short, it all started with events in the not-too-distant past. The 1930s were the heyday of the Nazi Party, or National Socialist German Workers' Party, which gained great influence and power under the leadership of Adolf Hitler. In 1933, the political organization reached its peak, and just 5 years later, it would start the Second World War. Aiming to become a unified superpower, Nazi Germany attacked Poland on September 1st in 1939, starting the main phase of World War II. Of course, events had begun earlier in 1931, when Japan, the Nazis' main strategic ally, invaded Manchuria. By 1941, the war had spread more widely, increasingly threatening the territorial integrity of the country. Finally, on December 7, 1941, the United States entered the war. Thus, waking up from a dream with the sudden and devastating attack on Pearl Harbor by Japan, one of the Nazis' main allies, America was forced to go to war with Japan. This led Germany and Italy to declare war on the United States. A new strip was created on both the Pacific and Western European fronts. The Bloody War, which caused great destruction and loss of life, ended in 1945 with the unilateral surrender of Nazi Germany to peace. The United States, which had begun to seize world economic hegemony before the First World War, that is, since the early years of the last century, achieved even more rapid economic growth in the context of the First and Second World Wars. In Europe, the US has already made its influence felt. The economic and political restructuring of the Eurozone was conceived as part of the Marshall Plan, launched in 1947. Of course, all this was to be carried out with US financial assistance. This promised that Europe would soon and almost completely come under American political influence. The aid amounted to about $13 billion. In current figures, this translates into hundreds of billions of dollars. The US did not want to stop at the West, but wanted to include Japan and South Korea in its sphere of influence. This is no doubt precisely why today we admire the economic and other miracles of the Eurozone and East Asian countries. All this mess has happened precisely because of the direct and indirect intervention of power number one, the United States. But it is worth underlining one fact. The driving force behind this whole economic cycle was not only the historical and geographical circumstances, but also the existence of another superpower at the time. The USSR was therefore capable of competing head-to-head with the United States in every field. The long-term and fierce rivalry resulted in numerous benefits and losses for both powers in terms of human history. On the one hand, the frantic struggle for success in space, man on the moon. On the other hand, military technological advances. It finally came to the point where all this global economic and political nonsense led to the collapse of the huge empire officially called the USSR. One power now ruled the world. Yes, we are talking about the United States of America. Naturally, declining competition, repeated economic crises, financial crises, and complacency over the years led to the contraction of the American economy, to a further increase in foreign debt, and to the emergence of the People's Republic of China as the superpower of the future, another leftist power that had emerged on the shores of distant Asia, and was gradually becoming a great and influential power. The processes were not numerical, but geometric in sequence. In China, we are witnessing the awakening of a sleeping dragon. At the same time, it should not be forgotten that China's biggest trading partner is the United States, whose share of trade turnover amounts to hundreds of billions of dollars, despite the intense rivalry between them. In fact, what the US wants is to keep China in economic balance, because in that case, the US will gain on both sides. But thanks to the volume of large-scale investment, technological advances, access to new markets, strengthening military potential, and other factors, China is not only becoming the second superpower, but in some areas is even aiming to overtake its rival. Recent massive losses in the US stock markets are a case in point. The well-known techno-economic attacks that led to huge financial losses for US super billionaires, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and others, were carried out by China. Chinese microchips, artificial intelligence, and electric car solutions shook both the stock market and real economic indicators. The US tried to launch counterattacks, but they did not have the desired effect. The Trump administration's temporary increase in tariffs and even its extreme approach towards some countries was just situational. Of course, this is the US, and it's hard to overthrow it, no matter how hard you try. Because while China's recent and emerging economic maneuvers have occupied the agenda, the US has reached important milestones and gained political and economic professionalism and experience since gaining independence and establishing a balanced political, economic, and legal system. The Trump administration's temporary increase in tariffs and even its extreme approach towards some countries was just situational. Of course, this is the US, and it's hard to overthrow it, no matter how hard you try. Because while China's recent and emerging economic maneuvers have occupied the agenda, the US has reached important milestones and gained political and economic professionalism and experience since gaining independence and establishing a balanced political, economic, and legal system. In the first quarter of 2025, with Donald Trump's second term as president, one of the most prominent economic tools, which had been a dream for years, was increased tariffs around the world. In the new era, Trump dealt the biggest blow to China, raising total tariff subject tariffs to 145%. In countries with current account deficits, a general 10% tariff was imposed on imports. These measures, of course, led to a contraction in global supply chains, causing a 1% decline in maritime transportation. According to the International Monetary Fund, these aggressive tariffs could lead to a slowdown in world economic growth. The Trump administration is currently choosing between bad and very bad, exploring and proposing possible solutions. One point should be emphasized here. Trump and his team are sticking to their traditional slogan, "Make America Great Again," for their second presidential term. This orientation has been chosen as the basic doctrine, aiming to increase employment, reduce foreign dependency, and further strengthen production. In this sense, without going into too much depth, we can list the following categories in general and brief terms: tax reforms, trade and protectionism, deregulation, energy policy, employment, and labor market. Now, when we look at Trump's first presidency, it is worth noting that many successful results have been achieved, but all these achievements were overshadowed by the COVID pandemic that swept the world, and as a logical consequence, Donald was not elected to a second consecutive term as head of state. Of course, the activities of the next administration were not as successful, and Trump was once again deemed worthy of the office he claimed. Now his job is more difficult. This time, he has to choose between bad and even worse. Now, there is a much more serious barrier, even without the pandemic. This is China, and this makes the situation even more tense. It remains to be seen what challenges and pressures Trump will face in the next 5 years, as China responds to his tariffs by not keeping quiet and then threatens Taiwan, one of the US's chip suppliers. Let's take a broad look at the changes Trump has made and wants to make under the slogan, "Make America Great Again." The Trump administration plans to reduce the corporate tax rate from 21% to 15%, introduced in 2017, and to incentivize investment by increasing bonus depreciation to 100%. In his March 2025 address to Congress, he announced that production-based tax cuts will be made permanent and all temporary provisions in the TCJA will be extended. Options to increase the top tax bracket from 37% to 39.6% for individuals with annual incomes over $1 million are being discussed. According to the Yale University Budget Lab, the average income loss per household due to the 20 to 25 tariffs is projected to be between $2,100 to $3,800 in the short term. As a result of the 145% tariff, which comes into force in February 2025, imports from China could fall by 40%, resulting in capacity shifts at European and Asian ports. A 10% global surtax on goods from many parts of the world could take away a competitive advantage in exports to the US. This situation then increases the costs of companies that shift their production to the US and drives up costs in the domestic market. China's goal is to impose retaliatory tariffs of 125% to 145% against the US, especially on exports in the agriculture and manufacturing sectors. Another problem is that a 1% drop in maritime transportation volume leads to disruptions in the supply chain and triggers inflation. Banks loosen capital requirements as Dodd-Frank provisions are lifted. Wall Street banks post $37 billion in trading revenue in the first quarter. Streamlined emergency powers orders, enacted under the Open Action Order, now allow agencies to quickly repeal regulations without public consultation. Supreme Court rulings restrict the executive powers of agencies such as the EPA and SEC, giving Trump the ability to quickly repeal new regulations. The U.S.'s deregulation of the energy sector, such as pulling out of the Paris Agreement, increasing the number of oil and gas auctions on public lands, and halting clean energy funding, is leading to legal battles in the sector. Trump's executive order, titled "Protecting American Energy from State Overreach," blocks state carbon emission standards. Another area where the U.S.-China trade war has had an impact is on rare earth and solar panel supplies, and as a result, As China parks retaliatory tariffs through ASEAN countries, Taiwan's semiconductor sector has become a strategic risk. According to BCA research, a potential blockade or tariff on Taiwan could paralyze global chip supply and risk double-digit declines in Nvidia and TSMC shares. Trump's threat of a 32% Taiwan tariff in mid-2025 triggered a rebalancing process between China and Taiwan. In sum, the world has entered a new period of polarization. Economic protectionism and right-wing conservative movements are redefining the global order. Scientists and international organizations argue that this new order will be balanced and sustainable as long as its extremes are avoided. However, Trump's aggressive tariffs, deregulation, and energy policies continue to increase uncertainty both in the US and globally. There is so much to talk about, but time is limited. The next videos will be prepared in the best way possible in terms of editing. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. See you!